Commander Buzz Lightspeed stood at the helm of the Galactic Federation's most advanced reconnaissance vessel, staring at the blue-green planet through the ship's quantum viewing screen. His antennae twitched with anticipation as he prepared to make first contact with yet another primitive species. After all, that's what the long-range scans had indicated. Primitive, barely spacefaring, still using combustion engines for void's sake. "Sir," his science officer Petrix called out from her station. "Final scan results are coming in now." Her tentacles flew across the holographic interface as she compiled the data. "The species calls themselves humans." Buzz straightened his ceremonial cape and nodded sagely. "Excellent. Another species to bring into the enlightened fold of the Galactic Federation. Show me their weapons capabilities." The holoscreen flickered to life, displaying various human military equipment. Buzz's antennae drooped, then drooped some more. By the time the presentation finished, they were practically touching the floor. This can't be right," he muttered. "Petrix, run the scans again." "Already did, sir, 3 times. But they're using projectile weapons in the year 2157. Buzz collapsed into his command chair, his carapace clicking against the quantum-reinforced alloy. "They're literally throwing tiny pieces of metal at each other, really fast." Petrix's tentacles twisted nervously. "That's correct, sir." "What about their space combat capabilities?" "More metal projectiles, sir, though these are significantly larger." Buzz buried his face in his upper appendages. The Galactic Federation had sent their most advanced ship, equipped with quantum phase energy weapons and probability-altering shields, to make first contact with a species that still thought kinetic energy was a valid combat strategy. "Well," he sighed, "at least first contact should be simple. They'll probably worship us as gods or something." 3 hours later, Buzz stood in front of the United Earth Defense Council, trying very hard to maintain his diplomatic composure. The humans weren't worshipping them. They weren't even particularly impressed. In fact, they seemed to be amused. "So let me get this straight," said General Thompson, a sturdy human female with grey hair and an expression that suggested she was trying not to laugh. "Your entire fleet relies on energy weapons? No kinetic capabilities at all?" "Of course," Buzz replied, his voice dripping with condescension. "We evolved beyond such primitive methods millennia ago." "And your shields?" Lieutenant Luna Sterling chimed in from her position near the wall, her dark eyes twinkling with barely suppressed mirth. "They're designed to deflect energy weapons?" "The most advanced shield technology in the known galaxy," Buzz proclaimed proudly, "capable of dispersing any energy weapon ever devised." "But not, say, a chunk of tungsten moving at relativistic speeds?" Sterling asked innocently. Buzz's antennae twitched irritably. "Why would anyone waste resources accelerating chunks of metal when energy weapons are clearly superior?" The room fell silent for a moment before General Thompson spoke again. "Commander Lightspeed, I think we're going to have a very interesting cultural exchange." She paused, and this time didn't bother hiding her grin. "Would you like to see our railgun demonstration?" Buzz had a sinking feeling in all 4 of his stomachs that this first contact was not going to go according to protocol. Not at all. The demonstration field stretched out before them, a massive expanse of reinforced concrete and metal targets. Commander Buzz Lightspeed stood with perfect military posture, determined to maintain his dignity despite the human's persistent smirking. Behind him, Petrix was recording everything with barely concealed disdain. "Before we show you our primitive weapons," Lieutenant Sterling said, "perhaps you'd like to demonstrate your superior technology." She gestured to a row of heavily armored targets. "Just so we have a baseline for comparison." Buzz brightened immediately. Finally, a chance to show these primitives what real weapons could do. He pulled out his standard-issue quantum phase disruptor, a sleek weapon that hummed with barely contained energy. "Observe," he announced, taking careful aim. "This weapon cost more to develop than your entire planet's military budget." He pulled the trigger. A beam of pure energy, precisely calibrated to disrupt molecular bonds, shot toward the target. The air crackled with ozone. Mathematical equations solved themselves in real time to ensure perfect accuracy. The beam hit the target dead center and created a slightly warm spot. "Huh," Sterling said, examining the target. "That's interesting. Want to try again?" Buzz's antennae twitched violently. There must be some kind of interference. Patrick's scan for quantum disruption fields. "Actually," Sterling interrupted, "it's just good old-fashioned heat dissipation. You see, when you pump that much energy into a solid object, it tends to—" She launched into a detailed explanation of thermal dynamics that made Buzz's head hurt. But our weapons can destroy entire ships." "In space, sure," General Thompson added, walking up to join them. "Vacuum's great for energy weapons. No atmosphere to get in the way. But in atmospheric conditions, well," she shrugged. "Maybe that's why we stuck with ballistics." Buzz straightened his cape again, a nervous habit he was developing around these infuriating humans. "Very well. Show me these ballistic weapons of yours." Sterling's face lit up in a way that made all four of Buzz's stomachs clench. "Happy to. First up, this is what we call a 50 cal. She hefted a massive rifle onto her shoulder. "Nothing fancy, just simple physics," the gun roared. The target didn't just develop a warm spot, it ceased to exist. But, Buzz sputtered. "That's so inelegant." "Sometimes inelegant gets the job done," Thompson said. "Want to see what our railguns can do?" What followed was the most terrifying weapons demonstration Buzz had ever witnessed. These humans, these supposed primitives, had developed an arsenal that completely ignored the elegant principles of energy manipulation. Instead, they'd focused on finding increasingly creative ways to throw pieces of metal really, really fast. The railgun demonstration was particularly distressing. Buzz watched in horror as a simple piece of tungsten, accelerated to a fraction of light speed, turned a reinforced bunker into atomic dust. "But where's the artistry?" he demanded. "The technological sophistication?" Sterling patted the railgun affectionately. "Oh, there's plenty of both. We just put it into the delivery system instead of the payload. Why complicate things when simple works?" Because, Buzz struggled to find the words. "Because that's what advanced civilizations do." "About that," Thompson said, her voice suddenly serious. "We've been meaning to ask. These energy shields your ships use, they're designed to deflect energy weapons, right? Of course, the most advanced shield technology in the galaxy. But how do they handle kinetic impacts?" The question hit Buzz like a tungsten rod at relativistic speeds. He felt his antennae curl in on themselves as the implications sank in. Petrix, who had been quiet until now, suddenly spoke up. "Commander, I believe I know why the Council sent us to make first contact with the humans." "Not now, Petrix. But, sir, I've been analyzing their military doctrine and—" "I said not now." Buzz turned back to the humans, trying to regain his diplomatic composure. "Perhaps we should move on to discussing your integration into the Galactic Federation." Sterling and Thompson exchanged looks. "About that," Thompson said. "We have some concerns about your defense protocols. Maybe we should discuss upgrading your fleet's capabilities." Buzz had never felt more insulted in his life. These primitives suggesting they could improve upon millennia of galactic technological development. It was absurd. It was outrageous. It was... Another railgun shot thundered across the field, turning another target into subatomic particles. It was, possibly, worth considering. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Federation Council was not going well, mainly because Admiral Zap Brannigan kept pounding his appendages on the quantum crystal conference table, causing ripples in the probability field that made everyone's coffee cups phase slightly out of normal space-time. "They're primitives!" he shouted for the 7th time, his ceremonial cape fluttering dramatically in the artificial gravity. "They're throwing rocks at us. Very fast rocks, but still rocks." Commander Buzz Lightspeed shifted uncomfortably in his seat. After his report on the humans' military capabilities, the Council had devolved into chaos. Half wanted to immediately conquer Earth to prevent their dangerous primitive weapons from spreading. The other half wanted to pretend they'd never found the planet and quietly upgrade their shields. If I may, Patrix interjected, her tentacles manipulating a holographic display, the humans' approach to warfare is uncomfortably logical. Logical? Admiral Brannigan's voice reached a pitch that made the quantum crystals resonate. They're using gunpowder, in space. Yes, Patrix continued, remarkably calm, and it's working rather well for them. Our shields are designed to handle energy weapons by dispersing the incoming force across probability matrices. They have no defense against solid objects moving at... Enough! Brannigan slammed all 6 appendages down at once, causing several coffee cups to briefly exist in multiple dimensions. I move that we immediately launch a punitive expedition to show these humans the true meaning of advanced warfare. The council erupted in arguments. Buzz noticed that the more scientifically minded members were looking distinctly uncomfortable, while the military hardliners seemed eager to prove their superiority over the primitive humans. The motion passes, the High Chancellor announced finally. Admiral Brannigan will lead the expedition. Commander Lightspeed, since you have experience with the humans, you'll serve as his advisor. Buzz felt his antennae droop. Sir, I really must protest. The humans' weapons, while primitive, are nothing compared to our quantum phase disruptors and probability shields, Brannigan declared. We'll show them what real warfare looks like. 3 days later, Buzz stood on the bridge of the Federation's flagship, watching the first battle of the human war unfold. It was going exactly as he'd feared. Why aren't the shields working? Brannigan screamed as another relativistic tungsten rod punched through 3 decks of his command ship. Because, sir, Patrix explained with remarkable patience, you can't alter the probability of something that's already hit you. That's not how causality works. But our weapons are being dispersed by the atmosphere just like in the demonstration, Buzz added. Also, they've started using something called chaff to scatter our targeting systems. Chaff? Brannigan's color changed to indicate extreme confusion. What's chaff? Metal strips, small pieces of metal that they throw into space to confuse our sensors. They're defeating our quantum scanning arrays with strips of metal. Yes, sir. Also, their ships appear to be painted black. So our photonic targeting systems can't get a good lock on them. They're using basic visual camouflage. In space. Buzz couldn't keep the admiration out of his voice. It's so primitive, it's brilliant. The bridge rocked as another salvo of human weapons found their mark. Warning lights flashed as systems began failing across the ship. The artificial gravity hiccuped, causing Brannigan's cape to flutter less dramatically. Sir, Patrix reported, the humans are broadcasting a message. Put it on screen, Brannigan demanded. Lieutenant Sterling's face appeared on the quantum display. She appeared to be trying very hard not to smile. Having trouble with your probability shields, Admiral? This is impossible. Brannigan's color was shifting through various shades of outrage. Our technology is superior in every way. Except against rocks moving really fast, Sterling agreed cheerfully. You know what's funny about physics? It doesn't care how advanced your civilization is. Kinetic energy is kinetic energy. Another impact rocked the ship. Buzz checked the damage reports and winced. Sir, they're not actually trying to destroy us. These are warning shots. Warning shots? Brannigan's voice cracked. They're shooting through our most advanced ships with primitive weapons, and these are warning shots. Sterling nodded on the screen. We really did try to suggest upgrading your defenses. Still open to discussing that, by the way, along with terms of surrender. Surrender? Brannigan's color shifted to pure white, a sign of absolute shock in his species. To primitives. To the people who just demonstrated complete superiority in actual combat effectiveness, Buzz suggested gently. Sir, I really think we should... Another impact cut off his sentence. This one had been deliberately aimed at the ship's fancy quantum coffee maker, a particularly cruel blow to morale. Fine, Brannigan shouted. Fine, call off your rocks. We'll negotiate. Excellent choice, Sterling replied. Oh, and Admiral, you might want to lose the cape. It's actually making you more visible to our targeting systems. As the transmission ended, Buzz could have sworn he heard human laughter in the background. He made a mental note to request a transfer to a nice, quiet diplomatic posting after this was over, somewhere far away from humans and their terrifyingly practical approach to warfare. Petrix's tentacles were already busy at her console. "Sir, shall I begin compiling a list of Federation systems that might be interested in upgrading their defenses against kinetic weapons?" "Yes," Buzz sighed. "And Petrix? Add a line item for simple metal armor plating. Sometimes the old ways really are the best ways." Admiral Brannigan's negotiation strategy turned out to be ordering his entire fleet to open fire at once, probability shields at maximum power while screaming, "Superior technology will prevail." This would have been more impressive if the humans hadn't chosen that exact moment to demonstrate their latest innovation in space warfare. "Are those," Buzz squinted at the tactical display, "are those giant shotgun shells?" "Technically," Petrix responded, her tentacles flying across multiple holographic interfaces. "They're called cluster munitions. The humans apparently decided that if throwing one piece of metal very fast works well, throwing 10,000 pieces of metal very fast would work better." The space around the Federation fleet erupted in a cloud of hypervelocity projectiles. The probability shields, already struggling with the concept of solid objects, gave up entirely and filed for early retirement. Proximity alarms screamed as thousands of tungsten pellets riddled the fleet's outer hulls. "Status report," Brannigan demanded, his cape now significantly less majestic after being singed by an overloading control panel. "Sir," a junior officer reported, "our quantum targeting systems are confused. The humans have deployed something they call glitter bombs alongside their weapons." "Glitter bombs?" "Yes, sir, millions of tiny reflective particles. Our sensors are trying to calculate the quantum states of each individual piece and are beginning to smoke." Lieutenant Sterling's face appeared on the command screen again, looking even more amused than before. "Having trouble with our low-tech solutions, Admiral? You know what doesn't get confused by glitter? Regular cameras?" Brannigan's color shifted to a deep purple of rage. "This is impossible. Our weapons are capable of restructuring the very fabric of reality." "Sure," Sterling agreed, "but reality is pretty stubborn about conservation of momentum. Speaking of which..." She pressed a button off screen. The entire Federation fleet shuddered as electromagnetic pulses swept through their formation. Systems flickered, quantum processors reset, and probability matrices collapsed into singular, very unfortunate states. "Did they just..." Buzz started. "Yes, Commander," Petrix confirmed. "They turned our ships off and on again, using magnets." Brannigan was practically vibrating with fury. "Launch the quantum torpedoes, all of them." "Sir," Buzz tried to interject, "I really don't think..." But it was too late. The Federation's most advanced weapons, capable of altering probability itself to ensure hits on their targets, streaked across space toward the human fleet. Sterling's response was broadcast on all frequencies. "Oh no, not quantum torpedoes! Whatever shall we do against such advanced technology? Oh wait, we just built really thick armor and put our important systems inside Faraday cages." The torpedoes impacted the human ships in spectacular displays of quantum physics. When the reality distortions cleared, the human fleet remained stubbornly intact. "How?" Brannigan's voice had risen several octaves. "How are they doing this?" "Sir," Petrix explained, highlighting several displays, "they're using what they call ablative armor, multiple layers of relatively cheap material designed to be destroyed by our weapons, absorbing and dispersing the energy. It's actually rather brilliant in its simplicity. But our targeting systems are being defeated by black paint, sir. Our shields don't work against physical objects. Our quantum torpedoes are being tanked by thick metal plates." Buzz watched as another wave of human kinetic weapons approached the fleet. They weren't even bothering with fancy targeting systems. They'd simply calculated where the Federation ships would be and filled that space with supersonic metal. It was warfare reduced to its most basic principles, and it was terrifyingly effective. "Sir," he suggested carefully, "perhaps we should consider a strategic retreat to reassess our tactical doctrine." Before Brannigan could respond, Sterling's voice came over the comm again. "Oh, About that retreat option? We took the liberty of seeding your escape routes with what we call space mines. They're just big boxes of explosives and metal balls, very primitive, very effective. You can't do this. Brannigan was approaching new heights of vocal pitch. This isn't how advanced warfare works. There are supposed to be quantum calculations, probability matrices, reality distortion fields. Yeah, Sterling agreed. We thought about all that. Then we remembered Newton's laws work just fine. The tactical display lit up with another wave of approaching human weapons. These ones appeared to be guided missiles. "Oh, come on," Brannigan shouted. "Rockets in space! That's just embarrassing." "Embarrassing but effective," Petrix noted, watching as the missiles ignored all attempts at electronic warfare and quantum interference. They're purely mechanical guidance systems. We can't hack them because there's nothing to hack, just gyroscopes and accelerometers. Buzz watched as the Federation's most advanced fleet was systematically dismantled by technology that would have been considered outdated on most primitive worlds. Somehow, the humans had taken their technological limitations and turned them into advantages. Every attempt at quantum trickery was met with simple physical solutions. Every probability shield failed against basic kinetic energy. Every electronic warfare attack was defeated by mechanical backups. "Sir," he said to Brannigan, "I believe this might be a good time to reconsider the humans' offer to upgrade our defenses, assuming the offer still stands." Sterling's face reappeared on screen. "Oh, it stands. We'll even throw in some basic armor plating. You know, for the next time you run into someone using primitive weapons." Brannigan just stared at the screen, his color shifting through various shades of defeat. His cape, now slightly on fire, gave one final dramatic flutter before falling limply to the deck. Sometimes, Buzz reflected, the most advanced solution wasn't necessarily the best one, especially when the enemy insisted on solving problems by throwing very fast rocks at them. Admiral Brannigan had finally snapped. After watching his advanced fleet get systematically dismantled by what he kept calling space cavemen, something in his highly evolved brain had simply given up and gone home. "Fine!" he shrieked, his color cycling through shades that hadn't been seen since the last quantum reactor meltdown. "If they want primitive, I'll show them primitive! Pilot, ram their flagship!" Buzz exchanged alarmed looks with Petrix. "Sir," he ventured carefully, "I don't think that's—" "Silence!" Brannigan's cape, now more of a charred rag, fluttered weakly as he gestured at the view screen. "They think they're so clever with their rocks and their metal and their complete disregard for quantum physics. Well, let's see how they handle this." The Federation flagship lurched forward, its quantum drive spinning up to full power. On the tactical display, Buzz watched in horror as their vector aimed directly at the heart of the human fleet. Lieutenant Sterling's face appeared on screen again, looking more confused than amused for the first time. Are you trying to ram us? Really?" "Ha!" Brannigan's voice had taken on a slightly maniacal edge. "Not so primitive now, am I?" "Actually, sir," Petrix interjected, "ramming tactics are considered one of the most primitive forms of naval warfare. The first recorded instances on Earth date back to—" "I said silence." The humans, however, seemed remarkably unconcerned about the quantum-powered warship bearing down on them. In fact, Sterling appeared to be trying not to laugh again. "Admiral," she said, "did you know that humans have been dealing with the threat of ramming attacks for, about 5,000 years? Your primitive defenses are nothing against our quantum drives." "Yeah, about that." Sterling pressed a button off screen. "You might want to look up an old Earth naval technology called torpedo nets." The space between the fleets suddenly blazed with light as thousands of metallic cables became visible, deployed in a complex web pattern. The Federation flagship, traveling at a significant fraction of light speed, hit the net exactly as designed. Physics, being the utterly unsympathetic force that it is, took over. The quantum drives trying to push forward met the immovable object of 5,000 years of naval defensive evolution. The resulting energy had to go somewhere. Unfortunately for Admiral Brannigan's dignity, most of it went into tying his flagship into what the humans would later describe as a pretty neat bow. "How?" Brannigan whispered. staring at the tactical display showing his once mighty vessel now twisted into something that looked like a quantum physics student's failed art project. "How did you do this?" "Simple physics," Sterling replied cheerfully. "Your fancy quantum drives might bend reality, but they still have to follow conservation of momentum. We just provided a really sturdy place for that momentum to go. But, the Admiral's color had faded to a pale shade of disbelief. "We're supposed to be the advanced ones." "About that," General Thompson's voice cut in as she joined Sterling on screen. "We've been meaning to discuss your definition of advanced. You see, where we come from, technology is about solving problems effectively, not just complexity for complexity's sake." The remaining Federation ships, watching their flagship turn into an abstract sculpture, began powering down their weapons. Several crews could be seen through their view screens, frantically tearing off pieces of their own ceremonial capes to wave as surrender flags. Buzz stepped forward, carefully avoiding the sparking remains of a quantum probability calculator. "Admiral, I really think it's time we—" "No!" Brannigan stumbled to his feet, his charred cape giving one last pathetic flutter. "I have one final weapon, the ultimate in quantum technology." He pulled out what looked like a small remote control. "The reality rewriter. It can alter the fundamental forces of the universe itself." Everyone on both sides watched in awkward silence as he frantically pressed the button. Again and again. The humans didn't even bother raising their shields. Sir?" Patrick said gently. "They deployed their glitter bombs again. The quantum targeting system can't establish a lock because it's too busy trying to calculate the position of each individual reflective particle." But, Brannigan stared at his ultimate weapon, now displaying an error message about exceeding its computational capacity. "This cost more than some planetary systems." "Could have just used a mirror," Sterling suggested helpfully. "That's what we did. Sometimes the old ways really are the best ways." The Admiral's color finally settled on a shade that Petrix's medical scanners identified as complete emotional shutdown. His cape, sensing the dramatic moment, chose that exact time to finally disintegrate entirely. "I believe," Buzz said into the awkward silence, "that we're ready to discuss those defense upgrades now, and perhaps a few lessons in practical engineering." The humans' laughter echoed through every quantum communications channel in the fleet. Somewhere in the vast distances of space, physics itself seemed to be chuckling at the absurdity of it all. The peace negotiations were held on Earth, a fact that made several Federation representatives twitch nervously every time they heard the distant sound of weapons testing from the nearby military base. Admiral Brannigan had been quietly retired to a nice facility where he could play with quantum calculators that weren't connected to anything important. His cape had been given a proper military funeral. Commander Buzz Lightspeed, newly promoted to Chief of Technological Integration, sat across from Lieutenant Sterling and General Thompson as they finalized the details of the Federation Human Defense Partnership. "So," Sterling said, reviewing the holographic documents, "you'll be implementing basic kinetic armor on all Federation ships?" "Yes," Buzz replied, his antennae only twitching slightly now when he heard the word basic, "though I still don't understand how we missed something so fundamental." Petrix, now heading the new Department of Practical Physics, looked up from her datapad. "Actually, I've been researching that. It seems we became so focused on advancing technology that we forgot to ask if we were advancing it in the right direction." "Speaking of advancement," Thompson added with a smile, "we've been looking at some of your quantum technology. Turns out it works pretty well when you combine it with good old-fashioned kinetic barriers. Who knew?" "The best of both worlds," Buzz agreed, trying not to sound too embarrassed. "Though I have to ask, that business with the glitter bombs and the black paint, was that really necessary?" Sterling's grin widened. "Oh, that was just for fun. We actually had much more sophisticated countermeasures ready. But watching your sensor arrays have existential crises over party supplies was too entertaining to pass up." "And the torpedo nets?" "Well, we figured anyone advanced enough to build quantum drives but basic enough to try ramming probably hadn't thought about super tensile steel mesh. Sometimes the oldest tricks are the best tricks." A junior human officer rushed into the room looking excited. "Lieutenant Sterling, the prototype for the new hybrid weapon system is ready for testing." "Hybrid weapon system?" Buzz asked, suddenly nervous. "Oh yes," Sterling said, standing up. "We combined your quantum probability manipulation with our kinetic delivery systems. Want to see?" 20 minutes later, they stood in the testing range watching as the new weapon demonstrated its capabilities. Buzz had to admit, it was rather impressive and terrifying, mostly terrifying. "So it uses quantum calculations to predict where the target will be," he summarized, "but instead of trying to alter reality, it just puts solid objects in the way." "Exactly," Sterling beamed. "Your complex math, our simple solution, the best of both worlds." "And the glitter." "Oh, we're keeping that. Sometimes you need to remind people not to overcomplicate things." Beatrix's tentacles were already taking notes. "The Federation Council will be very interested in this collaboration, though perhaps we should wait until they've recovered from the shock of being defeated by, what did Admiral Brannigan call us? Space cavemen with fancy rocks?" "About that," Thompson said, pulling out one final document. "We have a suggestion for updating the Federation's technological advancement metrics. Maybe rate civilizations on problem-solving effectiveness rather than just complexity." Buzz reviewed the proposed changes, his antennae perking up with interest. "This actually makes a lot of sense, though it might take some time for the more traditionalist members to accept it." "Take all the time you need," Sterling said. "We'll just be over here, throwing rocks really fast and solving quantum physics with party supplies." As if to emphasize her point, another weapons test thundered in the distance. Several Federation representatives jumped, then tried to pretend they hadn't. "Oh, and one more thing," Thompson added, pulling out a small box. "A gift to commemorate our new partnership." Inside the box was a ceremonial cape, a very simple, plain, ceremonial cape. "It's made of basic ballistic fiber," Sterling explained. "Completely quantum-proof, highly resistant to energy weapons, and—" She paused for effect. "Machine-washable." Buzz stared at the cape, then at the humans, then back at the cape. Finally, he did something he'd never done before in his diplomatic career. He laughed. "You know," he said, putting on the decidedly unfancy but highly practical cape, "I think this is the beginning of a beautiful, if somewhat terrifying, friendship." "Just wait until we show you what we can do with duct tape," Sterling replied with a wink. Somewhere in the universe, physics nodded approvingly. Sometimes the simplest solution really was the best solution, even if it involved throwing very fast rocks at very expensive problems. And glitter. There would definitely be more glitter.